Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into another fascinating personality type today.
Absolutely. Always excited to explore these nuances.
Today, it's all about ENTPs.
Sure.
We've got two insightful articles from the Spiritual Seek to guide us.
Sounds intriguing. The spiritual seek always offers a unique perspective.
Yeah, they delve into the motivations and inner workings of ENTPs, beyond just the typical Myers-Briggs stuff.
Looking forward to uncovering those layers.
And I think you'll help us connect the dots, make sense of it all.
Happy to help.
So right off the bat, the first article throws out these really vibrant descriptions of ENTPs. Ingenious maverick, purveyor of intellectual play, innovative explorer.
Eloquent visionary too, right?
Yes, eloquent visionary. It's like they're painting a picture with words. What jumps out at you from these descriptions?
Well, they definitely capture that dynamic energy, that spark that ENTPs are known for.
Right.
And they hint at this core element, what really drives them. It's often called extroverted intuition, their dominant function.
Extroverted intuition. Okay, so break that down for us a bit.
Essentially, ENTPs are constantly looking outward, absorbing information from the world around them.
They're like sponges, soaking it all up.
Exactly. And they see potential possibilities in everything, connections that others often miss.
So that's what makes them the ultimate idea people, always buzzing with new concepts.
Precisely. The article even compares their minds to playgrounds and workshops, which I think is a pretty apt analogy.
I love that. It really paints a picture. But can that be a double-edged sword?
Oh, absolutely. Because while that constant flow of ideas is a strength, it can also make it hard to, actually finish things.
Because they're on to the next shiny new idea before the last one is even fully formed.
Sometimes, yeah. The excitement of what's next can overshadow the need to, see things through to completion.
It's interesting how strength can become a challenge, just like that.
It's all about balance, isn't it?
Now, the article also mentions introverted thinking as their auxiliary function. How does that play into the whole ENTP mix?
Well, that's where the logic comes in.
So it's not just a jumble of ideas in their head.
Not at all. Introverted thinking means they process information internally through logic and analysis. They evaluate ideas, spot flaws. They figure out the most efficient path forward.
So brainstorming and critical thinking all in one package.
Pretty much. But this heavy emphasis on logic, it can sometimes make them appear detached.
Detached from what?
Well, from emotions, both their own and other people's. They might prioritize objective analysis over subjective feelings,
That makes sense. The article actually compares them to lawyer types, always focused on logic and principles above personal considerations.
Yes, and that can definitely lead to misunderstandings, especially in close relationships.
Definitely something to unpack when we talk about relationships later on. But sticking with their core traits, the article also highlights their eloquence and love for debate.
Right. Well, that stems from the interplay of extroverted intuition and introverted thinking. They're always absorbing information, analyzing it, and then testing it out through conversation.
So they love to argue? Is that it?
Not exactly. It's more about exploration, understanding different perspectives. They often play devil's advocate, not to disagree, but to really test the strength of an argument.
So it's about intellectual exploration, not just being argumentative for the sake of it.
Exactly. But of course, that directness, especially paired with their maybe less developed emotional sensitivity, it can be a bit much for some people.
Yeah, I can see how that could rub people the wrong way.
Right. And it's important to remember, with ENTPs, there's always more beneath the surface.
Speaking of beneath the surface, the article breaks down these 4 cognitive functions, right? Extroverted intuition, introverted thinking, but then also extroverted feeling and introverted sensing. Can we dive into those a bit?
Absolutely. We've already touched on extroverted intuition, their dominant function.
Right, that constant intake of information and seeing possibility.
And then introverted thinking, their analytical powerhouse.
Making sense of all that incoming data.
Now, extroverted feeling is interesting. It's their tertiary function, which basically means it's less developed.
Okay, so what does that mean in practice?
Well, when it's strong, it contributes to their social charm. They can connect with others on an emotional level.
But when it's weaker?
That's when that insensitivity we talked about earlier might come out, even if it's unintentional.
Got it. And then lastly, we have introverted sensing, which the article calls their inferior function. What does that mean?
So introverted sensing is all about grounding yourself in concrete experiences, understanding the past and how it applies to the present and future. But ENTPs, with their future-focused, possibility-driven mindset, this can be a bit of a blind spot for them.
So they struggle to learn from past experiences or get bogged down in details.
Yeah, sometimes. They might neglect practical considerations because they're so focused on the bigger picture, the what-ifs, the possibilities.
It's like their strength in envisioning the future can sometimes make it harder to stay grounded in the here and now.
That's a great way to put it.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. ENTPs, they're idea generators, expert analyzers, love a good debate, but maybe need to work on that emotional intelligence, right? And pay attention to those practical details. Am I summing it up correctly?
I think that's a pretty good snapshot, yes. But of course, each ENTP is an individual. They'll express these functions in their own unique way.
Right, of course. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. Now, the second article from the Spiritual Seek gets into ENTP subtypes, the turbulent debater and the assertive debater. What's the difference between those two?
Well, the turbulent debaters, or ENTPs, they tend to be more driven by a need for approval. They might second-guess themselves or be sensitive to how others perceive them.
So they're a bit more self-conscious, maybe a bit more emotionally reactive.
You could say that, yes. While the assertive debaters, the ENTPs, are generally more confident and less affected by external opinions.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have these two variations, but both still with that core ENTP energy at their heart. Now, I'm curious, how does all of this translate into their real lives? Their relationships, their careers.
Well, that's where things get really interesting, because ENTPs bring this unique set of strengths and challenges to everything they do.
Well, let's unpack that then. Let's talk about how those ENTP traits play out in the real world.
Sounds good to me.
First up, relationships. What makes an ENTP a good partner? What are some of the potential bumps in the road?
Well, they're incredibly engaging partners, charismatic, great conversationalists. But that reliance on logic and their love for debate, as we've discussed, that can sometimes cause friction, especially if their partner feels constantly analyzed or challenged.
So finding that balance between mental stimulation and emotional sensitivity is key for them.
Absolutely. ENTPs, they thrive in relationships where their partner appreciates their intellectual depth, that willingness to explore different perspectives. But they also need to develop their emotional intelligence, to build deeper, more fulfilling connections.
Now, the articles also mention ENTPs sometimes struggling with commitment or practical matters. How does that show up in relationships?
Well, remember that dominant extroverted intuition?
Always looking ahead, seeing possibilities.
Right, and that can make it hard to settle down, to commit to long-term plans. They might get excited about a new idea and shift gears suddenly, which can leave their partner feeling confused or frustrated.
So they need a partner who's adaptable, who understands that need for spontaneity, who can appreciate their unique way of looking at the world.
Exactly. Someone who can provide a grounding influence without stifling their need to explore.
Makes sense. Now, what about careers? What are some ideal paths for ENTPs?
ENTPs thrive in careers that offer intellectual stimulation, autonomy, a chance to innovate. They're not built for rigid routines or strict hierarchies.
They need space to think creatively, to challenge the status quo.
Precisely. The article mentioned things like entrepreneurs, inventors, scientists, lawyers.
All roles where thinking outside the box is essential.
Exactly. They're natural problem solvers who love a good challenge.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, from cognitive functions to relationships and careers. What are some of the key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with today?
Well, I think it's important to remember that ENTPs are driven by this thirst for knowledge, this desire to understand the world. They're constantly seeking information, exploring viewpoints, challenging the norm. And that makes them incredibly inspiring, truly innovative individuals.
But they also need to be mindful of those less developed functions. To work on that emotional intelligence, pay attention to practical details.
Absolutely. Finding that balance is key. And when they do, they can truly flourish in all aspects of their lives.
Well, this has given us a lot to think about. As we wrap up today, what's that one thing you want our listeners to really take away from our exploration of ENTPs?
I think the key takeaway is that understanding personality types isn't about putting people in boxes. It's about appreciating the diversity of human thought, recognizing strengths and weaknesses, and learning to navigate our interactions with greater awareness and empathy.
Beautifully put. I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. It's been a fascinating dive into the world of the ENTP.
It was my pleasure. And to our listeners, if this sparked your interest, I encourage you to keep exploring. There's so much to discover about personality types and how they shape our experiences.
That's all the time we have for today. Until next time, keep diving deep.
So we've covered, some of the core traits of ENTPs, some of their strengths and potential weaknesses. But it's always helpful to ground these abstract concepts in, well, real-world examples.
Yeah, totally. It's like, okay, we get the theory, but how does it actually play out in someone's life?
Right. So it can be fascinating to look at individuals who are, thought to have been ENTPs to see how these traits might have manifested in their lives, their accomplishments, their challenges.
I'm all for that. Let's bring these concepts to life a bit.
Okay, so let's start with someone who embodies, I think, that innovative spirit of the ENTP, Thomas Edison.
Oh, perfect example. The inventor of the light bulb, the phonograph, countless other groundbreaking technologies. It makes sense that he'd be an ENTP, with that constant drive to experiment, to create, to push boundaries.
Exactly. Edison was known for his, well, relentless curiosity, his willingness to challenge the norm, to envision possibilities where others saw limitations, that unwavering belief in his vision even when faced with setbacks, that aligns perfectly with the ENTP's dominant extroverted intuition.
It's interesting how that inventive spirit directly connects back to that function we talked about, right? It's not just about having ideas, but about, I guess, relentlessly pursuing them until they become a reality.
Right. ENTPs are driven by this deep need to understand how things work and then find new and better ways of doing things. They're not content with the status quo. They're always seeking to improve, to innovate.
Edison's story definitely highlights that drive. But what about someone from, say, a different field? The world of art and entertainment, maybe?
Well, in that case, Walt Disney is another compelling example. Think about it. The creator of Mickey Mouse, the visionary behind Disneyland, someone who revolutionized the entire animation industry.
Disney, yeah. Boundless creativity, captivating storytelling, that grand vision for the future of entertainment. Those definitely sound like ENTP qualities to me.
Absolutely. Disney had that same spark of innovation, that desire to bring something new and, well, magical into the world. And just like Edison, he faced his share of challenges. But that determination, that belief in his vision, fueled by extroverted intuition, allowed him to overcome them and achieve, well, extraordinary things.
It's fascinating how those ENTP traits that we sometimes frame as weaknesses, like being easily bored or struggling with follow-through, can also be the driving force behind such incredible accomplishments. It's like two sides of the same coin.
It really is. And it highlights, I think, how important it is for ENTPs to find the right outlet for their energy. Environments where those traits are not just accepted, but celebrated and nurtured. Both Edison and Disney, they found fields where their curiosity, their love for exploring new ideas, their ability to see the bigger picture were truly valued.
Their stories are a great reminder that it's not just about understanding your personality type, but about finding where you can truly thrive, where your unique strengths can shine.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that personality type, while insightful, doesn't define an individual's potential. ENTPs, like everyone else, need to, well, cultivate their strengths, work on their weaknesses, and find that right environment to truly flourish.
We've explored, the theory behind ENTPs, their strengths, their challenges. But I think it's always more impactful to see these concepts in action, right? To look at real-world examples.
Absolutely. Seeing how these traits manifest in, well, actual individuals can provide a much richer understanding.
Earlier, we touched on some famous figures who might have been ENTPs.
Yes, exploring the lives and accomplishments of individuals who, embodied these characteristics can offer a more concrete perspective.
It makes it feel more real, less theoretical.
Yeah.
So are there any other figures that come to mind when you think about ENTPs, people who really exemplify those core traits?
Well, we've already discussed Thomas Edison and Walt Disney, both demonstrating that, innovative spirit and ability to think beyond their time. But there are so many other fascinating examples across different fields.
Oh, I'm curious. Give us some more.
Well, consider someone like Leonardo da Vinci, a true Renaissance polymath, excelling in art, science, invention. His curiosity, his experimentation, his constant pursuit of knowledge, it all really embodies that ENTP thirst for understanding.
Da Vinci, that's a great one. His notebooks are legendary, right?
Yep.
Cover anatomy, engineering, painting, philosophy. It's like he couldn't get enough of learning and exploring.
Exactly. And that reflects that tendency we talked about, connecting seemingly disparate ideas, seeing patterns that others miss.
So extroverted intuition isn't just about new ideas, but also about making connections between existing ones, seeing that bigger picture.
Precisely. They're constantly absorbing information, analyzing it, weaving it into their existing knowledge base.
It's amazing how one cognitive function can lead to, well, groundbreaking inventions and profound artistic expressions. It's all connected.
It really speaks to the adaptability of the ENTP personality. They aren't bound by convention, limited to one area of expertise. They embrace challenges, the unknown, with, well, almost a sense of enthusiasm.
That's a really inspiring way to look at ENTPs. They're not just thinkers, they're doers. They want to make a real impact on the world.
Absolutely. And while they might face challenges like we discussed with their, less developed functions like introverted sensing or extroverted feeling, these challenges can also be opportunities for growth.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the ENTP personality, what are some final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with? What's that key takeaway?
Well, I hope this exploration has provided a deeper understanding of the ENTP personality, its complexities, its potential. Remember, understanding personality types isn't about putting people in boxes, but about appreciating the diversity of human thought and behavior. It's about self-awareness and empathy.
Beautifully put. Thank you for joining me today and sharing your insights. It's been a fascinating journey into the world of the ENTP.
It was my pleasure. And to our listeners, keep exploring. There's so much to discover about ourselves and those around us.
And that's all the time we have for today. Until next time, keep diving deep.